So, well, welcome everyone to the Creative Careers Industry Panel. Thank you for joining us, I'm sure all over the world, as we know that there are many people who are all over the world at this point. My name is Kristen, and I am the North American Opportunities Manager with the Career Center. I'm based in St. Andrews. And I am joined here today by the U.S. development team and the amazing panelists that we have that we'll introduce you to in a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah to introduce her team.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks everyone for joining us, and to the panelists again for joining us as well. I wanted to quickly introduce myself and the rest of our U.S. development team before we jump in. So as Kristen said, I'm Leah Dalton. I'm the Manager of Alumni and Family Engagement for the United States in the Development Office, and I work remotely from Maryland. And I have three other colleagues who also work remotely from the States. So we have Catherine Humphreys, who is our head of development, and she's located, head of development for the US, located just outside of Philadelphia. Lily Nguyen is a gift officer located in California, covering the western half of the country. And then we have Moira Sharkey, who is also a gifts officer based in Massachusetts, covering the eastern half of the country. So as a team, we work together to strengthen and engage our community of alumni, parents, and supporters in the US. And we also work to build our network through events like this, typically in person. Of course, we're adapting now with our virtual event series. And we're also growing philanthropic support for the university from our US community. So I'll pop our contact details into the chat. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to any of us. But anyways, back to Kristen.
Great, thank you, Leah. All right, so without further ado, you've all showed up here so that you can see and chat with our panelists. And so I am going to turn it over to our panelists. Would love for our panelists to introduce themselves, who they are, what they're up to, and a bit about their story. So Elizabeth, would you be willing to go first here?
Absolutely. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be able to interact with students and to talk to students and to take your questions. And it's very exciting. And I also want to start by acknowledging the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on in our country and around the world. You know, as a mixed race person, I've been aware of these things my whole life, and I'm just so excited to see these conversations happening more broadly. And I was also excited to see the Instagram takeover on the St. Andrews Instagram from students talking about not staying neutral and Black Lives Matter. It's just a very hopeful time, and I hope it's an exciting time for you guys too. It's definitely an exciting time for me. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in Chicago. I moved to New York when I was 18 to attend New York University, and NYU was not a good fit for me. So I did a lot of research and I transferred to St. Andrews, and it was really one of the best experiences of my life. It was probably the best decision I've made in a lot of ways. Just the way I grew and what I learned and the things I was exposed to, it really helped shape the person I am today. And then after St. Andrews, I moved to New York, back to New York. And the first job I got in communications was with a media communications company called Gorkana, which was founded by a St. Andrews alum. And seeing my St. Andrews degree on my resume is one of the things that got me that first interview. And so that kind of brought home for me, like, the St. Andrews connection more than I think it would have otherwise. So after working at that media communications company for 3 years, I moved to Paris, where I went to graduate school, and I studied international affairs, focusing on conflict resolution. And after getting my master's, I knew I wanted to contribute through my writing to the world and to conversations that matter to me, but I wasn't really sure how to do that. And I ended up starting to write freelance for a publication called Global Politics Magazine. And I came across that publication through a St. Andrews group on LinkedIn calling for alums to submit articles. So it was another connection that I was like, oh, the St. Andrews connection thing really matters. And eventually I did go through a staffing company. I moved to LA, where I am now, and I work as a marketing and communications manager at a nonprofit here. The foundation where I work, we distribute about $100 million in grants to nonprofits, not only in LA, but throughout the world. And I write newsletters, I write press releases, I write quotes from our president and CEO and different board members. So to be able to contribute through my writing to things that matter to me has been a really just phenomenal experience, and I'm really motivated in my work. I also continued my freelance writing. My novel was published 3 years ago. My second novel, I'm currently shopping around to get a good agent, so there's a little more broader marketing of it than the first one. And I still write freelance articles. So yeah, that's basically my background. And also I'm the president of the St. Andrews Alumni Club in LA. Yeah, and I'm just really excited. So thank you for having me.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Elizabeth. Really appreciate it. Rick, would you go next, please? Oh, you are muted. There we go.
I'm not muted anymore. Thank you for that. That was lucky. Yeah, great. Let me just continue on from those words to say that I also am very grateful to be with you all today. What I will say about St. Andrews, it's a relatively small university, but we have a network around the world with long, caring tentacles. And although I graduated 23 years ago now, my goodness, I'm very proud and honored and thankful for being part of the St. Andrews community. I live here in Brooklyn. My background, English, as you may be able to recognize, but I've lived in the States now for 14 years. Just real quickly, so I graduated in '97. I went straight to the States for the first time and interned at the Smithsonian, at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C., then returned to London and started off as a porter at Christie's, the auction house. Within a year or so, I got involved with the wine department. But I did not have a gap year before St. Andrews, so I did that for around a year and then went on a gap year and went around the world, worked in Australia, worked in a vineyard, got my first taste of public relations working in Sydney for a large insurance company called the NRMA. And then I came back to London, and within a couple of months, thanks to my academic family network, my St. Andrews network in London, I got my first big break working in public relations. I worked for a communications agency called Nelson Bostock, which since my time there has grown. I think it's one of the leading PR agencies in the town. Then I got a call back to Christie's as a public relations guy, and I worked in London for 3 years. One of my most fun sales I worked on was selling the football jersey that Pelé wore in the 1970 World Cup final. And then I was transferred with Christie's to New York, where I worked again in public relations, and then back into the wine and whiskey field. And I was actually responsible for setting up the first regular series of whiskey auctions in the city in 2010, 2011. During all of this, I was feeling a call to ordained ministry, believe it or not. And I went back to seminary here in Chelsea, Manhattan. I got my Master's of Divinity. Graduated 2014, and I was ordained an Anglican priest. For those that don't know, the Anglican Church, essentially, if you take the Anglicans, the Romans, and the Orthodox, and you put them all together, they together account for probably around 95% of Christians around the world. I was in ministry for 5 years up in Westchester County, which is kind of a suburb of New York City. I got involved with a lot of social outreach, building houses in the town of Newburgh, about an hour north of the city, which is a very violent city and needs a lot of help. That was great work. But one of the things I'm really feeling called to is, believe it or not, working with the dying. So I'm really interested in end of life explorations in the widest sense, not just through the Christian lens. But I left Bedford, moved back to Brooklyn with my wife. My wife works in contemporary art in Chelsea, Manhattan. Works for a big dealer called David Sverner, big German contemporary art dealer. And I got back into half-time ministry. I work in Midtown Manhattan at Church of the Incarnation, just a block south of the Morgan Library. And while I do that, I'm also I was a volunteer chaplain at Mount Sinai during the worst of the pandemic in April and May, which was great work. And I also am developing a yoga practice. And I think going forward, my life will be potentially part of further development of chaplaincy skills in the hospital setting, in the medical setting, with hopefully a move into more end of life work. And then I think, coupled with that, I hope that as people get more into mindfulness and spiritual health, I think my yoga practice will develop, and there may be something to do there on the side as well. That's essentially me. Great to be with you all.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rick. And finally, Ian, would you like to introduce yourself? You're muted.
I'm muted. Clicking the button.
There we go.
Hear me now? Good. Sorry about
Yep,
that.
there you are.
Great. Yes, actually, I plan events for my job, so it's interesting to be on the other side of the camera for once. I'm Ian. I am from Scotland. I grew up about an hour away from St Andrews, I graduated in 2002. I studied modern history. I was in John Burnet Hall, if that means anything to anyone. Is that still there even? I don't know.
It is, yeah.
I actually haven't been back to St Andrews since I graduated, which is kind of shameful, I suppose. But when I graduated, I didn't have like a real. I've never really had like a career path or a career direction I really followed. I've been sort of winging it most of the way. When I left St Andrews, I didn't have a job. I actually spent a year I moved down to where my parents had moved down to the southeast of England, so I went down there and I kind of did a few different jobs down there. Decided to go back to school, did a master's in international security at Bristol. It was a 1-year master's, and then after that I got a job working as the legislative assistant to a member of Parliament at the House of Commons. I was there for about 2.5 years. It was an incredible job to do at that time. It was the kind of waning years of the Blair government, and just a young, sort of vibrant, exciting place to be, kind of quite glamorous to be at the House of Commons and work there as well. So I loved doing that. When I was at Bristol, I'd met somebody from the States who'd been dating long distance. So after 2.5 years with all the visa stuff and everything, I moved over here in 2007 to Chicago. Been in Chicago ever since. The transition career-wise is quite tough moving to the States. If you work in politics, it's a lot about connections. It's a lot about understanding the particular sort of political machinery and the democratic process in that country. So moving to the States, it wasn't an easy kind of move for me to stay in that field. So I had to wait to get work authorization for a few months. But once I got that, I kind of changed direction. I ended up getting a job at KPMG, one of the big accounting and consulting firms. I worked in their trade and customs group. Basically, we worked with multinational companies, helping them. I mean, there was a lot of different things we did, but essentially we helped them save money on their import and export operations, pay less duties and that kind of stuff. So for the beginning of it, I was like in a support role for a national team of consultants, and then I actually became a consultant towards the end as well. KPMG was a great company. They was treating me very well, and they kept me in a job during the recession. So I'll always be grateful for that. It wasn't a great fit for me, the job. Just my interest, and I think also just my skills. It wasn't the greatest fit. I could do it, but I was never going to be great at it. I don't think so. I was always kind of looking out for something else, and then there was the organization I work for now, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. I was familiar with them since I moved to Chicago. I'd kind of always had my eye on them as a place to work. My wife actually was looking. She knew I was looking to move, and she kept her eye on a few things. She actually found the job that I ended up applying for. It's not a big organization, but they were going through a bit of a growth spurt in 2014. So I applied there. I joined the council in their events team. The council is it's an independent, nonpartisan public education organization. Our mission is to keep people in Chicago and people in America engaged in what's going on in the rest of the world. So we do that primarily through events, and so I work on the events. And the first job I had at the council was quite low level. It was a bit of a step down in terms of pay and in terms of level, but it was definitely a good move for me. I really enjoy the work, and I've got worked my way up a little bit since I've been there. I now sort of oversee the strategy for the events that we do, deciding what topics we were going to cover, how we're going to cover them, what speakers we're going to invite, and kind of exploring new platforms to make the content more engaging and reach different audiences. And so there's quite a lot of different parts to it. There's sort of a communications part too. I do a little bit of writing. I do our kind of weekly email blast to our members and stuff. So yeah, and I've been there 6 years in October. So yeah, kind of a broad range of things that I've done, but yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm doing just now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you to all of you who have introduced yourselves. Now, my observation from hearing you discuss your career paths is that you have taken many creative paths to get to where you're going. And I feel I have this pinball image going through my mind of your careers taking lots of different twists and turns, touching on these creative industries. Can you tell us, what are some of your keys to success on that path? What are things that students need to know about their career path as it relates to having maybe more of a creative, fluid type career?
Muted. Sorry, I'm happy to jump in here. Shall I go
go
first? Yeah, good. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I think creative and fluid, I think very often go hand in hand. You know, while I was very thankful for the opportunity in my 4th year at St Andrews, I don't know if they still have these, what we called the milk rounds, where some of the big banks, law firms, and accountancy firms come in to meet with undergrads in the 4th year. Wonderful, wonderful thing. I decided against that. I wasn't too sure where I was headed, but I knew that something creative, writing, something like that was out in my future, whether it was journalism or something along those lines. And I was an art history major, so I knew that the arts world was calling to me, and that's why the auction house world was just the perfect fit, particularly when I ended up getting into public relations. I think, you know, a key for me is particularly, you know, when you come out of school, maybe at the age of 21, 22, there were certainly friends of mine that had their 5-year plans, their 10-year plans, and I thought that was wonderful for them, but I knew it wasn't going to work for me. And I think just being nimble-footed, retaining your contacts with your friends at St Andrews and seeing what they're up to is always great. It truly is a global network, St Andrews alum community. And you know, I guess without sounding sort of too generic, but just look for opportunity, network, communicate. And I think really importantly, particularly in the early years of a career, is it can seem quite daunting sometimes starting at the bottom and trying to begin to go up the chain and up the ladder and you know, not necessarily having a sense of exactly what you want to do, but that's all okay. I think your 20s generally is a period of great exploration and opportunity. And I just encourage you to, as much as you can, don't be scared of risk. Don't be scared of taking a chance. And very often, particularly in the arts and the creative world, sometimes you have to start with an internship or right at the bottom of the rung of the ladder and show that you have the enthusiasm and you engage in the opportunity and you're very positive, and that's what will begin to lift you up. So, you know, in summary, take a chance, be nimble-footed, and allow yourself to go into your career path with open eyes and just look for those signs that will take you to the next stage where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. Rick, I have a follow-up question on that. How do students know what signs to look for? What are some of those signs?
Wow, that's oh my goodness, that's a great question. You know what? I think I kind of relate to what Ian said as he left university in those first few years. It wasn't meticulously planned, and things not necessarily fell into his lap or my lap. I don't want to put words into Ian's mouth, but have some trust, I guess, that whether you want to call it destiny or fate or luck or chance or whatever you want to call it, is that you are going down a path, and you have some control of that, of course, but things come across your path for a reason. And I think you have to have faith in that. And when opportunity comes knocking, aggressively and actively engage and find out what's going on. It's a difficult one, Kristen, to say, what these signs look like. There's emotion, there's feeling, and there's oh wow, what a great phone call, or oh wow, what a great email, or oh my goodness, I just found this on a blog, and this is a St. Andrews alum, and they're asking for X, Y, and Z, and just look for opportunity and be aware, and be aware what calls to you, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I'm hearing some curiosity, almost some like serendipity in some ways. Things you couldn't necessarily plan for are some of the things that students might be looking for as an opportunity. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I completely agree with the serendipity aspect of it, but I also think that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I really like the idea that, like, even though you may be in a job that you think isn't directly in your field, like my first job at Gorkana, I wasn't doing a lot of writing, but I was learning about media and how that works and how journalists get pitched to and what a press release looks like, and learning more and getting those skills so that later on when I was pitching to publications, I knew what to say. So even if it's not exactly what you think you're supposed to be doing, I mean, I'm a very goal-oriented person, so sometimes I'm like, I need to be doing this at this time. This is the company I want to work for. And that's not the best attitude, especially when you're starting out. Try to flourish where you are and learn what you can, because you don't know when those skills are going to come in hand later. And when I was moving to LA, the staffing company, I had interviews at the foundation where I am now, the Jewish Community Foundation of Los Angeles, and also Rand Corporation and UCLA. So Rand Corporation and UCLA are these big names, but the work I'm doing actually is much more fulfilling because I'm writing all the time, even though the Jewish Foundation is a little bit smaller. And so I think taking those opportunities to learn and grow, because you never know when those skills are going to matter later, and also not necessarily judging a book by its cover. You're not going to necessarily get a job at the UN when you're 22. Like, you can get jobs at other places and build the skill sets you need to eventually be at the place you want to be. And that's okay. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, the one thing people always say, you got to network. I mean, that's just an obvious one for me too. I did not do enough of that, maybe because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But it's so valuable when you know someone. I don't even know them well, just have had some interaction with someone. They will remember you. And I think there's something that informational interviews. I don't remember that even being a thing when I was a student, or even when I was interning, when I was just out of school. That seems quite common now, though. And it's a great idea. It's like a low risk, low pressure way to sort of talk to someone who's doing a job. You can find out what it's really like, get someone's honest opinion, but also now you have someone who will remember your name and your face, which I think that goes quite a long way, rather than when you're hiring and you're faced with a kind of a stack of resumes that kind of all look the same. If you've had some connection with someone, it can go quite a long way. So I would definitely leverage things like that. If you reach out to people out of the cold, and I mean, maybe not everyone will respond, but I imagine most people probably will. Most people want to help people out, is my experience. Certainly, if anyone reached out to me, I'd be as helpful as I could. I mean, I imagine most other people would be the same. So to take advantage of things like that, and if you can use the alumni network to kind of set some of those things up, then by all means do that. Yeah. Also to Elizabeth's point, I mean, if you're not going to necessarily land on the thing. If you have something in mind you want to do, and you can't get straight into that field, you always try a different direction. Try something slightly different and be open-minded to work in other areas or other organizations. It might lead you where you want to go, or it might help you decide you want to do something completely different. My wife works in HR, and she always tells me virtually no one goes to school planning to do HR. It's always they come in through some other route. and they end up temping or something, and they get put in the HR department, and they end up staying there forever. I mean, that's a huge growth area, HR, by the way. But the people who work in there have all kinds of backgrounds. They really do. And again, I think that's true for a lot of work. You don't know if you like something or you want to do something until you've given it a try. So internships are obviously a great way to do that. It's hard for some people, obviously, because they're not all paid. But I would imagine most private sector internships are probably paid, but to some degree. But yeah, you definitely use all those the kind of obvious things. But I would support all that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think in terms of informational interviews as well, you can learn, as we've heard from all three of you, that you didn't just end up where you are today or end up in any place along your career path right away. There were steps and processes, which is not always front and center when you just hear about what someone's doing in the world. So one of the things, Elizabeth, I want to go back to you, but of course open to any of the panelists, is that you have your full-time job, but you're also writing on the side, and you do a lot out with that 9 to 5 type work, or 8 to 5. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of having that, what that's done for your career, what has writing done, what has freelancing done for your career, and how can maybe students incorporate that into their plans for their career?
Yeah, absolutely. At first, the freelance writing is because I just wanted a voice after grad school, and I didn't really know how else to do it. And, it can be discouraging in the writing field. Like, you find out that all those celebrities that have a New York Times bestseller, it's because their agent or their publisher bought the first 10,000 copies. So it feels like impossible as an outsider to really get that in and start to get published. So at the beginning, it was more just because I wanted to have a voice. And then I discovered that the freelance world, there are lots of publications out there as soon as you do research where you can get published, you can submit, you can talk to editors. And through that writing, building my resume that way helped me get the current full-time job I have now, because my now boss read my articles and was like, wow, she can really write. I bet she can write press releases, newsletters, quotes from the president. So I really encourage people, especially starting out, that, yeah, maybe you don't get your dream job in a creative field. Maybe you're working at something like, there's an alum here in the LA area who's currently working at Chick-fil-A, which is an essential service. So he didn't lose his job while running a nonprofit on the side and filing for 501c3 status. Until that nonprofit takes off, he has this full-time job, but he also is doing this until he can get that status and start applying for grants. And so I would encourage students to find that creative outlet and to know that you can have balance. Like, every day I write for an hour and I write 500 words. And it doesn't seem like a lot, an hour, but that's an hour I'm not on Instagram or watching TV. Don't worry, I watch plenty of TV. But I think just, a journey of 500,000 miles is like, starts with a single step, or whatever that quote is. But I really believe that's true for writing or any creative career, that if you set aside time every day, you're giving it that importance. And eventually, after 500 words a day, you have a book. I have 2. But I still do my job from 9 to 5:30. And yeah, I would encourage people to find creative outlets and know that they are building your resume, they are building your experience, and you can balance both until the creative part either takes over or helps you get a job in that field.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's amazing. Anything else to add to that question?
I'd love to just jump in there and just support all of that. And as regards to extracurricular beyond the 8 to 5, the 9 to 5, Elizabeth says, you're not necessarily going to walk into the job that you really want initially. And finding other ways outside your working hours, either, as Elizabeth suggested, using your working hours to find the value in that, to learn skills for the next step, or as Elizabeth did, she's writing on the side. Another thing to consider, which I did when I was, a lowly porter at an auction house, moving Oriental jars around and paintings, and that was it, right? But I was going to night school. I was in London. I was able to take a course in journalism. I was able to take a course in photography. So just maximizing your potential and using those avenues to learn more and for further preparing your resume. So when you come across that opportunity, so for instance, I was a porter. Moving jars around, but then when I try to get into PR, I could say, but I've also done this night school course in journalism, and here's an article that I've written. And then one final thing is that, and you talked about signs, and this reminds me a little bit about a journey and how you know where you're going. As and when you meet mentors, engage with them and build that relationship. Now, Ian said, use the alum network. That's great. And I'll be honest, if someone emails me and says, I'm a recent St. Andrews alum or I'm about to graduate, can you please 10 minutes on the phone to talk about X, Y, and Z? The answer is always going to be yes. But mentors that you come across, you'll just meet people that you click with. When I worked at the Hirshhorn Museum, straight out of St. Andrews, there was a guy there in the public affairs department, a guy called Sidney Lawrence, and I met him 23 years ago. He's now turned into my American uncle. And recently painted a family portrait we have downstairs in our front room. And I've known him for 23 years. And when I come across those opportunities for where do I go next, or is this a good idea, or where's my call, my career going, those mentors can be invaluable because they've been there and done that, and they can give you great feedback.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. So one of the things I think on everybody's mind at the moment is certainty, perhaps, and maybe more uncertainty, because I think we're all learning that the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. Now, when it comes to career planning and taking a career, doing something in a creative field or taking a bit more of a creative route requires quite a bit of risk. Can you talk about, based on your experience of your career, looking back and what you can apply today, is now the right time for people to be taking risks, and why or why not?
I can go if nobody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's a hard question to answer for someone else. Because you don't know their circumstances. A lot of that will be somewhat financial. I mean, I was very fortunate. I think because I was Scottish and I went to Scottish University, I didn't have any tuition, and so I graduated without any debt. And that was very fortunate. But I could probably take more risks than some people. Maybe Elizabeth's example is quite good of someone who's working and doing something on the side to try and develop themselves in sort of a creative space. But that might be the model that would be sort of safest if you can do that. It's a hard question to answer without. It's a different answer for everybody, I think. But others might be much more sort of gung ho. But maybe I'm slightly more cautious in that sense. I was able to take while I lived. I was quite fortunate in those ways. But it's a different world now than it was even a year ago. But let alone 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, and I just want to talk about what Ian just said. I had student loans after grad school, so I was a little more scared or cautious. And once you start looking into like forgiveness programs, working at nonprofits, ways that you can do income-based repayment plans, there are more options out there than you think there are once you start doing the research. So I think that because it's true, I completely agree with Ian, you don't know everyone's situation. You don't know if everyone can afford to not have a well-paying job with benefits.
Yep.
Like that is 100% true. And it was true for me. Like I hadn't had debt. I asked my mom what debt was when I was like 8, and she was like, it's when all the money you make belongs to somebody else. And that terrified me. I was like, that's one of the scariest things. I don't even have any money. I was 8. And so it was a little scary to have debt, but I think once you look into those options, there is a way to make it work. And it is definitely a scary time right now. I don't want to like at all diminish that. I worked during the recession and I was very fortunate to be able to do that. But also I would say that there's no greater time to take a risk, because I don't know how stable the job market's going to be today. We don't know how stable it is to be tomorrow. So if you're able to take that risk, you might as well do it. You're young. You can have time to build your career and to get into the exact job that you want, because it may not exist right now, but like we've all said, you can be building those skills to get there during an uncertain.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah, I would say again, Ian's point, everyone's different. Elizabeth makes great points though about potentially risk averse with debt and so forth. Of course, you know, when I graduated, it was a sign, you know, the beginning of Cool Britannia many, many years ago. But I can tell you, for the first 10 years of my life, I was pretty much living paycheck to paycheck, is the honest truth. Because very often creative careers, particularly when you're younger, don't pay so well. It's just, you know, if I was a corporate lawyer, by the time I'm 25, 26, I'm probably having a grand old time. I'm working all hours that God gives me, but, you know, I'm bringing in 4 or 5 times what I was bringing in at Christie's, let me tell you that much. But you know, it is, and clearly it's a very scary time right now. And but to Elizabeth's point, it's arguably a great time, depending on your circumstances, to take a risk. And I will give you this one anecdote. In my mid-20s, when I was living paycheck to paycheck, I really, really was drawn to training as a TV cameraman, TV camera person, right? Whether that was going into broadcast journalism or whether that was going sports events, whatever. I found a college outside of London that would have trained me over a year with great opportunities to meet the right people at the end of it, and it cost a chunk of change. Now, when I was 25, that was a huge amount of money. Looking back, now that I'm a little older, I probably could have made it work if I'd been a little braver. Now, luckily, things have worked out great for me anyway, God willing, and life is good. But sometimes, you know, it is a risky time. It is a scary time in the employment market. But yeah, calculated risk with a little bit of intelligence behind it is not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so for everyone in the audience, I just want to let you know, I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll open it up to you to take your questions. I would love to know from our panelists, 1 or 2 sentences, what is something that students need to know about their experience going to a university in Scotland and then working in another country, maybe coming to the US to work? What's something that students really need to be aware of and know that might not be obvious right now?
I can jump
in. Great.
Yeah, I think going to St Andrews will put you in quite a good. I mean, certainly I can talk from the perspective of someone who came to the States from the UK. Going to St Andrews should put you in quite a good position, certainly relative to most just graduates of most non-American universities. St Andrews has good name recognition. It definitely does in Chicago because they recruit quite heavily here, so a lot of graduates end up coming back here. I was amazed how many I meet. Actually, there's somebody who lives like 3 or 4 doors down from me, and I saw St Andrews sticker in the back of her car. I mean, I never knew her, but it turns out she graduated like 2 years after me. So it's weird. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if you went to, you know, Des Moines or somewhere in a bit further away from the big urban centers where they would have quite the same name recognition. But yeah, it's advantageous to have gone to St Andrews. It is still tough though when you're up against you know, Americans just have culturally have a very strong loyalty to their schools, a very strong sentimental attachment, and the British students just don't have. I'm not sure why that is, but so when you're going out, when you're sort of applying for jobs and stuff, I think there's always a little bit of preference from employers for those schools that are really close and familiar, and they may have gone to themselves. But I think going to St Andrews, you're coming to the States, you're in a pretty good spot. You might not have a huge network to draw from, but you do have name recognition on your side, and it's not just that they've heard of it; they know it's a good school too. So yeah, that I think take advantage of the network you can find, but you should be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and I think I heard a year or 2 ago that Chicago has the largest Highland Games outside of Scotland. Is this true?
It does have a big one. I don't know about the size thing. It does have a big
Okay.
one every summer. Sadly, this year it won't happen. But
Of course.
yeah, no, it's a good time. I've been a few times. There's a lot of people of Scots ancestry here,
Uh-huh.
or just interested in Scotland.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, my experience in New York City is that St. Andrews carries a lot of weight. Obviously, I'm a foreigner going in as an expat, so I can probably blag this a little bit louder than you all, but I have no issue, right? St. Andrews is in the Ivy League. There's no two ways about it, in the British Isles. And arguably, it's the greatest university after Oxbridge. Just say it. And you know, thanks to the work of the alumni folks that do great work for us here in the States, and I know this has been going on for decades, that St. Andrews has, I think, the highest per capita United States intake compared to any university in the British Isles. That's why when I moved here in 2004, I have friends all up and down the Eastern Seaboard and in LA. And I would be proud of your university, and I would go for it. And we are Ivy League people, and you need to listen up when I sit down with my resume, because I went to a great school. That's what I would say.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
touching on what both Ian and Rick said, St. Andrews alums, I know when I get an email, even before I was the president of the LA Alumni Club, you answer. Like, St. Andrews alums are a very loyal group of people in my experience. And so living in LA, I think the name recognition, I think, gets diluted the further you go west, in my experience, having lived in Chicago and New York. But I definitely think that the alumni networks are really important. They're more important than I even realized when I was entering the job market, and how alums really are excited to help each other. And yeah, even just friends of alums, whoever it is, networking and talking to people and asking to be put in touch with the alumni clubs in whatever city you're moving to, I think would be very helpful. And I'm always willing to talk to any student that emails me and try to help them.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to, I just raised my own hand. That's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to turn it over to our audience here. So if you have questions for our panelists, again, you can either, I'm monitoring the chat here. So either add your question to the chat, or feel free to put up a hand, and then you can unmute yourself. And if you'd like to put your camera on, you're welcome to do that. You don't have to. And we can engage with some questions here. Would anyone like to start us off? Any takers?
Hi, I have a question. I don't know if I can answer.
Oh, someone is really, really muted, or like pretty quiet. Is it Kathleen?
Yes, that's right. Am I still very quiet?
Yes.
I can hear them.
Speaker then. Yeah?
All right. Go for it.
Okay, great. So as someone with a relatively blank CV and just a maths degree to my name, what would be, and I want to get into the creative field, what would be a good way to use this lockdown period to kind of change my skill set, or just even get started?
I would consider online courses, depending on, if you have a relatively blank CV or resume, maybe think about the work experience you've had up until now, and somehow, as Elizabeth said at the start of the conversation, see any work experience you've had, if you've learned any skill sets that would take you into the particular sort of creative career or field that you're looking for. And depending on what you want to do, there's great online courses. When I came back into New York about a year ago, I was considering having a side gig as a copy editor to help bring in the money. And NYU has great relatively straightforward online courses in copy editing with all of that introduction to the right people at the end of it. The University of San Diego, believe it or not, has a great copy editing online course. So there's possibilities. If you've got time on your hands, think about online courses.
Wow, thank you. I'll check those places out. Thank you.
Yeah, and internships too. If you have a sort of more specific creative area you're interested in, if there's options where you live to do something like that, or maybe not even an internship, but voluntary opportunities too, just to kind of get a feel for different organizations and what they do and what other work's out there. And again, that will help put something on your resume to show that you're being proactive.
Yeah,
and introduce you to people as well.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
We have a question here in the chat. Were there any extracurricular activities you participated in while at St. Andrews, which gave you valuable experience, knowledge, or skills for entering the workforce?
I'd like to take that one, if you don't mind. So while I was at St. Andrews, I did fieldwork in Cambodia as part of my dissertation research. And when I came back, I really wanted to have a fundraiser to raise money for one of the orphanages where I had volunteered and done interviews and done research. And it was incredible, the community that I was able to rally. I got like a committee together, and then I would go to different shops in St. Andrews, and each of them wanted to like donate some sort of a product or a gift certificate for a raffle. The title of my event was Cocktails for Cambodia, which in retrospect maybe wasn't the best. I was 20, but I was really passionate. And I kind of learned from that you can put together a team, that people are excited to rally behind things. And putting together an event in that kind of a community, it just gave me a lot of confidence in my leadership skills. And so I can't even tell you how that event changed how I saw myself in terms of being a leader and being able to translate my passion into other people getting excited. And we ended up raising, it was the full budget for the year of this orphanage. We raised it in one night. And I was able to send that check to the person who ran the orphanage, this incredible survivor and Cambodian man. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I learned at St. Andrews, that if you are passionate about something and you're able to communicate that, people will rally around it. People will come out to support it, and you can make a difference just by sharing what you're passionate about and talking to people about it, and people love to support good causes. So that was one of the biggest experiences that helped me figure out myself at St. Andrews.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I've just very quickly, St. Andrews student groups. I was involved with Greenpeace in 93, 94, 95. It was a great experience just to know how to deal with meetings, humanity coming together, talking about stuff. If you want to get into photography or journalism, and you're still at St. Andrews, get involved with a student newspaper. There's all kinds of opportunities you can do. Yep. And utilize those. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if my extracurricular activities at St. Andrews were as useful as I would have liked. But when I was at Bristol, I actually I planned to hold a whole class trip to Brussels to go to NATO and the European Council, and that was a really good experience for them, just sort of event planning and logistics and kind of working with international organizations. And it was a cool thing to do. Everyone got a lot out of it, and that was probably the best, most relevant thing I can think of. It was good, definitely a good thing to have on my resume when I was applying for jobs.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is do something, and that will be beneficial. So you'll gain skills in that process. We have another question here. What would you look for to make candidates stand out? Or what would make candidates stand out to you, perhaps?
Yeah, there's a few different things. I mean, the times I've been involved in hiring processes, I mean, there's a lot of different things you look at. Obviously, the university and the particular subject they studied, and their GPA or their I can't remember what they use in the UK now, but stuff like that is obviously you look at that. But to stand out, yeah, I think it's interesting when someone has something that's a little, I don't say unusual, but unorthodox or unexpected. That will definitely catch your eye, especially when you got a stack of resumes. And maybe for people who are just out of school, they might not have that yet. But and it kind of comes back to the point we were talking about earlier: is for more creative careers, people who have tried something else or done something different and then sort of pivoted. If that will stand out in a resume. It could in a good way and a bad way. It's how you talk about it. It's the kind of narrative you tell about your own kind of path. But I think as long as you can, if you've got something different on your resume and you can talk about it in a very positive way, you can show what you got out of it. I think I think that would definitely stand out. Assuming someone, assuming you're interviewing people that have broadly similar qualifications and sort of backgrounds, so something that's different will stand out.
Yeah,
to me.
Great, amazing.
Yeah, I would say, in the interview process or the meeting process, confidence, not arrogance. So a sense of absolutely knowing why you're intrigued by this field, but don't come across as like, I know it all. It's the worst thing. And then with resume, that's kind of an obvious thing to say, but with Ian's point, you have a bunch of resumes. Cover letters are gold dust if they're directed and thoughtful. And the worst thing is that you get a resume for a particular job and there's nothing in that resume that particularly acknowledges the particular job, right? So it's difficult, folks, but if you find a wonderful opportunity you really want to go for, make sure your resume somehow is targeted into what that job is looking for, right? Specific.
And I'll just jump, okay, Elizabeth, really quickly in there. That's where informational interviews are very helpful too, because you can learn more about the organization. You can get those sort of nuggets that you can sort of sprinkle into your cover letter. It makes it a little bit more direct than someone who's coming in totally cold.
Yeah, totally.
And I would add to Ian and Rick both said this previously, but reaching out to someone directly, as opposed to just doing the blank application, it does make a difference. Like, even if they don't hire you, and Ian talked about this, they will remember you. And I even had someone a year after I had emailed them, email me back and be like, we actually have an opening now. I had left that city, I had moved, but don't think that like me writing a thoughtful email, or you, whoever it is, writing a thoughtful email to someone in a position of power where you want to work isn't going to make a difference, because it might. And that might make you stand out as opposed to just emailing jobs at whatever and putting your resume out there.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, 100%, because things can come back. You may not get that particular job, but they'll have your resume and your name if you've been proactive, like Elizabeth, and they might come back to you in 6-12 months. Yeah, that's a great point.
It happens all the time. Yeah. And there's a few different schools of thought on things like thank you letters too. I know some people who are really big on that. Like if you don't get a job, you thank the person that interviewed you and you just express your interest again. And if you're the one person that does that out of 10 or 15, you're more likely to be remembered. It's all about being remembered in a positive way. Leaving some kind of impression rather than just being sort of anonymous.
Enthusiasm, folks. Enthusiasm.
Ooh, that too.
That's right. Yeah. Interest and enthusiasm go a long way, huh? All right, we have one more question here, and then we'll have to wrap up this really amazing conversation. So maybe in a short sentence here, in hindsight, is there something you wish you would have done or done differently when leaving St. Andrews and entering into the career world in order to get yourself out there?
I wish I would have known about the New York Alumni Club and reached out to them, because I didn't even know it was a thing. And apparently they're very active. I've even heard they have a May Ball now. And I graduated 13 years ago, so maybe it was different. But I wish I would have known, because I would have loved to just be a part of that network and have shared experiences. And I think it would have been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Very quickly, don't just always go with the first thing that comes in front of you. I was very happy with Christie's. It was great, and it turned out to be a great career. But there were other things I could have explored when I first came out of St. Andrews. But I was kind of like, I could have that conversation, but I'm really directed here. Maybe things would have changed. be open, and even if you think you've got your first shot, but someone else is calling you to have a conversation, make sure you have that conversation.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure coming straight out of St Andrews. I mean, the job I had at House Commons was a really great job, and it worked out quite well in that sense. Just generally, though, I think, echoing a lot of the points that Rick just said. I don't know. It's good to be flexible. But also have something of a little bit of a plan. It's not going to have to be 10 years, but having some sense of. I mean, I never really had that, and I probably bounced around a little bit more and didn't always make the best decisions sometimes, because I wasn't really aiming towards anything at all. I was just kind of seeing what I sounded like, I like the sound of. But yeah, having a little bit of a plan, but being totally flexible and open-minded, is probably really good advice. And don't be sort of paralyzed by fear. I mean, I spent way too long at KPMG probably because I was earning a reasonably good salary, but I didn't really like the job. But I was kind of scared to leave because I didn't. That's something else. A lesson I've sort of learned is kind of think ahead a little bit and don't feel like you have to be stuck where you are. And sometimes it's good to take a step into the unknown and be bold.
Yeah. Amazing. Great. Well, the last thing that I just want to say here is one of the things that all of these panelists have emphasized is the power of connections and networking and talking to people, and specifically about how to do that within the St. Andrews community and the importance of doing that in the St. Andrews community. So one of the things that I just want to point you to is St. Connect. If you haven't heard of St. Connect yet, it's the St. Andrews global online community that's connecting St. Andrews current students and alumni and people in our community from around the world. So Leah has actually put in a link to the chat. So if you haven't been there yet, please go on and find a link to the chat there. Also, to Elizabeth's point, Elaine has added a full list of alumni clubs. So if you are in one of the areas, I mean, they're all over the world. So wherever you are, definitely check that out and really do get connected, as Elizabeth had mentioned there. So we are at an hour here. We are at our time. I just want to thank you three so much for your time, your wisdom, your insights. I've learned a lot here today, and I'm sure everyone on this call has. So thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent.
Our pleasure.
All right. Well, that's us for now, and we will, if you have any questions, let us know. But bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.